Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to get started in about a minute or so. In the meantime, there's the Storm question and answers that you can submit any questions you have, and we'll kind of go over that. Well, Paige, do you think we should soldier on or just wait a couple more minutes? I haven't heard.
To give everyone fair time for their questions, maybe we can go ahead and start, and we can do a quick check-in if Saddiq has not arrived on getting to cover his part.
Okay. Okay. So let me get into the right program. So I'll go ahead and start. So well, welcome everyone. Today we're going to cover research plans, kind of covering the intellectual merit and the broader impacts. This is primarily in the project description section of your proposal. And so what we're going to do is we have some slides to kind of go over, and then the rest of the time we're going to just, we found that people really appreciated just having a solid Q&A session after. We're not going to do the breakouts. We'll just, have plenty of time for questions and answers after we go through these slides. And in general, I think these slides will be eventually posted to the Storm web page. So you don't have to worry about, copying them down. You'll get a copy of them after the workshop. We'll have these posted. So why don't we go ahead and start, Paige? Next slide, I guess. So one theme I hope that has come out during this workshop is knowing your audience for your proposal. Who your audience for your proposal is, and it's the reviewers. That's your primary audience, not us as program directors or yourself. It's really the reviewers are your audience. And so it's really important to kind of know as best you can of who that audience is. Of course, you won't know the particular people, but just in general, the type of audience that that program uses. Okay, so Saddiq is trying to get in. Let me just pause, and I'm going to give him a quick email to unite him with our organizer. Just a second. Apologies, everyone. Okay, sorry about that. I'm getting faster at typing. So what was I saying? The audience. And so this is a topic area that you can talk to with your program director or the program that you're going to submit to, of kind of understanding the general audience that you would be talking to for your program director, meaning kind of the variation of topics, typical discipline backgrounds that are used as reviewers, that type of dimension. So in your proposal, you're talking to your scientific community, meaning in your general area. there will be experts on the panel in your area of research. And so you're talking to them. So they will know your field, know the literature and, you know, the literature trends of your research area. And so that's your one piece of your audience. But since this is a career proposal and the panels tend to be more heterogeneous in terms of topic level, you're also talking to kind of number two, the broader scientific community of your discipline area. So these are researchers, senior researchers that are in other fields of that program description portfolio. So you're also talking to them. So in that case, your proposal has these two levels of talking to the expert, plus also having to do some kind of coaching of the value of your fundamental knowledge and educational impacts to other people on the panel of part of this broader audience. And also you're talking to all the taxpayers. This has to go with the actual outcomes and the value of it to society and intellectually. So these are three things to keep in mind. So next slide. I just included the NSB merit review criteria here for intellectual merit and broader impacts. It's always good to kind of review it because this is what the reviewers use as a tool to evaluate your proposal. So you want to kind of review them. So you include this type of information for the reviewers to use. You make clear of what the knowledge is in terms of the fundamental, in terms of the intellectual merit, and then the benefit to society for the broader impacts. And then you have, for both pieces, these criteria apply to both. You want to make sure the approach you use to structure your project is well-formed and based on sound rationale, and also incorporates mechanisms to assess success. And you make clear that you have the expertise and the qualifications and the resources to conduct the work that you're doing. Again, all these apply to both the intellectual merit and broader impacts. Next slide. It's also helpful as part of your proposal, your research, research description, and also as a tool to communicate to program officers now to kind of get our opinion of program fit, is to put together your research objective. And this is kind of the core story of what you're going to do for your research program, this 5-year project, and what are the outcomes and why is it important both intellectually and for society. And as best as you can craft this to be very clear and concise, the better, because you can use this as a tool to communicate both to the reviewers of kind of the highlight of what you're going to do to kind of hook them, and then they get really excited about it and then get more details further down in your proposal, but also as a tool that you can also use to communicate to program directors. So as part of this kind of one pager, so we can get you as an informed opinion as possible of your project to our program portfolio for fit. Next slide. So these are just some points to think about, especially in your project description. We've talked about motivating the problem, and this is kind of, having a clear research objective and having a clear approach of how you're going to approach your research questions and to basically provide the answers to the various objectives that you've defined. It's important to motivate your work, so that has to do with your literature review. Again, the reviewers of the career panel are senior investigators, so they're well versed into the literature of the various areas of the program. And so you want to make sure you have a very pointed and clear literature review to motivate why you've done the research questions that you've done. And to provide preliminary data, I think there's been a number of topics that we've covered this, of kind of establishing your expertise. It's always an ability to perform the research, and also to address certain maybe risks associated with the more high risk pieces of your project. And for those pieces of your project that may be more higher risk, to it's a good idea to provide contingency plans, because reviewers don't like to see a project fall apart because maybe one key objective doesn't work out the way that you want it, well, way you expect it to do. They always want to see fundamental knowledge results and clear, broader impact outcomes come out of a piece of work, regardless of if it happens the way you expect it to. Next slide, and I think we pass it over to Paige.
Thanks, Carol. So the next couple of slides are going to be talking about broader impacts, which is an important aspect of the proposal. And it's important to keep in mind that broader impacts can be achieved both through the research and the educational plan for the career proposal. And that activities can be accomplished through the activities that are directly related to specific research plans, and or potentially through the activities that are supported by but are complementary to the actual research itself. And as you are crafting your broader impacts, it is very helpful to make sure that they are integrated but explicitly spelled out in your proposal, to call attention so that there's no question what contribution your work is going to make to society. Now, this slide summarizes some sample ways that your research and educational plans could be making a difference to society. For example, you could be improving STEM education or educator development at the community college level or the K-12 level, or even within your own universities. You could be increasing the literacy of the public with regard to scientific knowledge, and so that they can better engage with science and technology. Maybe you're improving well-being of individuals within society, or potentially you're helping to create a more diverse and globally competitive STEM workforce. There are a number of different ways that you can make a difference and have outcomes that contribute to society. It's important to keep in mind, though, that these are just a few examples. This list is not exhaustive, it's not comprehensive, and it's not meant to be a checklist. The other thing that's very important to remember, and this is something that sometimes people will confuse, and that is broadening participation, which is the full participation of women, persons with disabilities, and underrepresented racial and ethnic minorities within the STEM fields. That could be a very important broader impact, but it is not synonymous to broader impacts. This slide is helping you to think about how do you prepare and distinguish yourself with your broader impacts. And so it's important to think about yourself and what you as a researcher and as an educator are passionate about. What are the things that you like to do? And are there things that you absolutely just don't want any parts of? And then also keeping in mind that your career proposal is over a 5-year time frame. And so what are your time constraints? What are the things that you are going to realistically be able to accomplish within that 5-year time frame? When we're thinking about how to set yourself apart with the broader impacts, it's important to do things that are beyond the expectation of a typical faculty member. When you are asking for funding for your research and your educational plans, it is really important to include in there funding to support your broader impacts. If there are activities or dissemination plans, it's very important to include that so that you build the credibility that you're going to carry out these activities. Within your universities, there are a wealth of infrastructural resources that you can leverage to do the work that you want to do. And so don't be afraid to access those resources. Maybe there are units that support STEM outreach that you want to get involved with, or maybe they have access to communities that you want to work with, or nonprofit organizations that you want to engage in. Or maybe there's an entity within your university that can help you with the assessment requirements for the career proposal. So those are some things that you can take advantage of within your own universities. When you do that, though, it's important to make sure that you are distinguishing what your contribution is. And then finally, before I turn it over to Saddiq, it's important to remember that when you are thinking about your broader impacts, don't provide that laundry list of activities. Figure out what you're passionate about and weave your story to show how this is integral to the work that you're going to be doing. And this slide is just a summary of some resources. There's some excellent resources out there on broader impacts and evaluation. And so those are just some links that you will have access to. So Saddiq.
Perfect. Sorry for coming in late. You know, after this, I always marvel like this measured and composed performances by Carole and Paige. Now I'll have to bring some gravitas, which is always tough for me. So I'll try now. Look, we've talked about different components of a proposal, and also broader impact, which is so important as Paige pointed out. But what about the quality of the proposal? Like, how do you feel good about a proposal as a reviewer? So, you know, what is the common characteristic in all winning proposals? And, you know, there could be many candidates, but most program directors will tell you that on balance, clarity wins out so often than not. Because, you know, as it's very natural for a human being to find something that makes sense to them, to feel okay about them. So clarity is very important, but how do you teach someone in bringing clarity to their writing? It's not an easy thing to do. When you see clarity, you know it. But we have found a way where we think that clarity can be introduced to the proposal, and that's what we're calling a specificity over here, meaning you have to be specific about what you're trying to do. And that comes only from when you know exactly what you're going to do, right? If you're thinking in the clouds and if you're using cliches and blasé statements, you probably wouldn't be conveying that. But if you think about what you'll be doing in the lab or on your computer, I think that then you will start seeing the clarity, because now that you will see the objective and perhaps the challenges associated with that. And once you have the challenges, you can create perhaps a good narrative in how you're going to overcome those. Another way of doing that more explicitly is to think about your master's and PhD student, right? They're going to do the real work in the field. Of course, they have to still learn how to get about doing the research and perhaps the new challenges that will arise. But if you keep them in mind, you will be writing something that is close to their understanding. If you give your proposal to your MS and PhD student and they don't really understand the objective because it's so high level, or the approach because it doesn't convey the specifics that they might need to go to the lab next day and do their job, then you have probably failed. And so you really have to think about those students in mind while you are creating a narrative. And we have this blue box here, and the emboldened words here are very important because they seem very simple, but they're difficult to transmit. You know, it's a mapping problem from your brain to the words and the inverse mapping to the reviewer's brain, right? It's a tough problem. So you are not doing your job effectively if you cannot specify your objective and then state the directly tangible challenges. And we'll come to talk about that in the narrow slide too, but you have to address that tangible challenge. It cannot be very blasé in the way of achieving this objective and then outline an understandable approach. And it may be understandable to you, but how do you make it understandable for others to overcoming these challenges? So let's talk about how we can do that in the next slide. So I think, even though I missed the earlier part, I'm sure Carole mentioned who's our audience, and really the most important ones are reviewers. And program officers, of course, read your proposal too, but they're influenced a lot by the reviewers, right? Because we cannot be subject matter experts in each topical area. So you write for the reviewers, and also understand if you can convince 8 people, it's much easier than to convince that one person behind those 8, that is yours truly and Carole and Paige. So the main point here is not to just inform about what you need to do, but also to coach people into understanding the finer points of your research, you know, the nuances of your challenges. You have to nudge them in that direction. And there are, you know, and there are reasons for that. One is they are technical experts, obviously, because we try to bring the best experts possible for a given panel and given topical area of the panel, but still they may not be sitting in your specific area. They may not be living and breathing that stuff. You are there and you can easily skip over steps and points because for you it's like sky is blue, whereas for them it's not. So you have to really coach them into understanding those particular challenges, innovations, especially the novelty aspects. Sometimes for you it's clear, but not for others. And like it or not, they can be time pressed, you know? So you have to pique their interest from the beginning. It's like reading an abstract of a journal paper. If it's all convoluted for you, you're already put off. So an awesome project summary will help, and you already perhaps have attended a session on project summary or will attend. Please pay attention to that. That's your calling card, that's your first impression, that's the cover of your book, you know, and you want to interest them from there. So you're writing for your master's and PhD student, but your writing style cannot be like that because you're going to insult the higher intelligence of your peers. So your coaching level has to be for a senior PhD student or postdoc. So when you bring a postdoc in, you're not teaching them from the beginning, right? You're actually nudging them into your area because they have the requisite skills and expertise. You just have to tell them about the particular challenges they may face, or the finer points of your objective. So you write for your MS PhD student, but your writing style, your language is like you have the postdoc in your mind. That's the platinum rule. Next slide, please. Some miscellaneous points. You cannot. That will be a serious mistake if you don't come to know your program or the program director in the way that they understand what you're trying to do. I think I'm sure everyone has said this to you by now. So please do know that program, and that you can do through the program announcement, but you also want to talk to the program director because we are continuously sunsetting areas. We're continuously empowering certain areas. We know national initiatives. We know what the presidents want to do through the right offices, through our higher ups. So we know what may be coming up. Or we would know that the way you're casting this problem is really not the way our community would understand. Let me give an example. For example, you're doing material science, and then you're doing engineering, and the way you write for material science is not the way you write for engineering community, and vice versa, right? So you have to know that if you talk to the program director, they'll be great for you. And of course, knowing PAPG, because formatting is so important. You don't want to make rookie mistakes. You don't want to make spelling mistakes. And the panelists are so turned off by that sometimes when they're recurring, because you have to read them again and again. Proofreading the proposal is very nice, which means you have to do it earlier, right? You don't want to do it at the last moment. And proofreading is two ways. Once, when you're submitting the proposal, you want to make sure there's no mistake. And after you submit it, you want to download the copy and note it, because you can find missing pages, you can find discolored figures, you can find fonts which are so small that are unreadable. And I think that's where we'll end for now, and then open the floor for questions. Am I correct, Carole and Paige? You're so muted.
And I'm so muted. There we go. Okay, so we've started to get some questions. And so the first one is the 2 months, is including 2 months of summer salary too much for a career proposal? This is a budget question, so I would definitely talk to the program director of the program that you're going to submit to. I think in general for engineering, it's typically up to 1 month of summer salary. But Saddiq, do you have any comments on that?
You're perfectly right, Carole. That's our usual way of doing things, but we will not return the proposal without review or discount your idea if you have put 2 months when the idea is done well with the panel. We can always come back to you and negotiate. So there's usual practice, but there is no no.
Yeah, it's not a no.
And I would offer that it's really important in this situation to talk to the program officer, because every PI has very unique circumstances. So if you're at a teaching institution where you have a particularly large teaching load, then there could be other arrangements made so that you buy out of certain things. So I think this is where it's really important to have the conversation with the program officer.
So question 67 is, do program directors from SCIs and engineering directorates also talk to each other? Yes. Yeah, I think you'll find for every core program, it has kind of programs that are kind of more aligned to it, and it could be within the division, but it could be across directorates. So for example, my program, I work a lot with the programs in the Division of Materials Research for, my, most likely collaborators. So yes, we do talk to each other. Any other comments from my colleagues?
Same with me, since I belong to the Mechanics of Materials and Structures program. Material science is like a sister organization, so DMR, a lot of programs, but I'm also the robotics program, which is actually a cross-directorate program between engineering and science. So we have a 10 program directors working group, equally divided between science and engineering. So yeah, I mean, that's very possible and happens.
The next question is that would it be a disruption if we mention merits next to the research aims / objectives? I don't know, Paige or Saddiq, do you want to give it first try? I don't really understand the question.
I'm not sure I completely understand, but I think what's important to do is to think about the style that you are creating for your proposal. And going back to something Saddiq talked about, clarity is absolutely critical. So if it disrupts your ability to explain in a very clear, concise way, then it could be disruptive. But I think it's hard to know without having that. So
I think what this person means is intellectual merit as a heading, perhaps as a section. Sometimes people do that, but they mention intellectual merits and then discuss what the merits of the proposal or approaches or research topic is. So if you mean that, again, it depends on you. There is no single formula to make anything look nice or beautiful.
Yeah. So the next one, for the results from previous NSF support section, if you've just recently had a funded NSF project and the start date is later than the career submission date, do you need to write anything about that award? I would definitely refer to the PAPPG requirements. Saddiq?
Well, if this is the only award you have, if this only award, first of all, look at PAPG, and whatever I say is overridden by PAPG.
You're right.
But if that's your single award, then nothing has been done. You can simply write, the start date is later, right? If you want to. But you may have other projects too, and if any one of them is very close to this one, then go ahead and use that. But again, go with PAPG. I don't think you'll be in trouble really. Just look at PAPG and follow it.
Right. And just to be conservative, it might be just a good idea if you don't have any other awards, just include the award and again, as Saddiq said, just indicate it hasn't started yet.
Yeah.
So in general, is it a good idea or bad idea to send the career proposal to the same program from which we have a current NSF award? So I'll just give my take on this. It's really the research objectives of your career project and the knowledge and its application that really determines the program you submit to, because your lab probably covers more than one discipline program. So I wouldn't base it on where you have a current award. It's really the fit of the project to the program that is important.
Same.
Okay. To number 71, to address the reviewer audience, would you please comment or suggest which portion needs to be more layman language / technical?
Paige, you want to try?
I knew you'd say that. I was going to suggest you try. So it's a fine blend. There are some aspects which should definitely be layman, and for example, like the broader impacts. As you are writing about that, the broader impacts should be understandable. That might be a place where you might want to write about, be writing to the target audience of the taxpayer. so that they understand, those things. But when you're talking about the specifics of your research plan and the nature of the work that you're going to be doing, I mean, you want to use understandable language, but you also want to make sure that you are using the language of your research field, because that is very specific to the nature of the research that you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, your research audience is very erudite, very educated, very experienced, especially for career panels. They will have no trouble understanding your technical pieces unless you go very jargony, very, say, symbolic and abbreviations and this, and you don't want to do that. But otherwise, I would be surprised if they don't understand whatever you write. And if they don't, then it's your fault, really.
Saddiq, you mentioned something really important there. And this is one thing that I have noticed when I was a program officer at NSF. This was an observation that came up very frequently. Using acronyms throughout, and multiple different kinds of acronyms throughout proposals, can become a big distractor. So be very careful about what you're choosing to acronym.
Use them sparingly. As much as you can. Yeah, I would say. Okay, Saddiq, I'm going to, can you kind of talk about the research objective and, what some kind of strategies to help define that? That's the next question, has to do with.
So what happens is that many people are doing research in similar areas for a given program. And if your objective can be taken by someone who's working in your area and be used in their proposal, then you have failed, because a generic objective. Your objective should reflect your research personality and your skills and talents and the novelty, right? So the qualifiers here mean that, hey, if you're saying I'm going to develop this thing or this framework, or I'm going to understand this behavior, well, anyone can say that. It's cliched. So what we want you to do is to bring those adjectives or innovative qualifiers that describe why maybe you're doing the most efficient way of doing things. Maybe you're doing the most high resolution way of doing things. Maybe you are, doing things in a way that comprise all the scales of observation that is possible. Something that make you stand out. So you have only 25 words, right? It's a pithy sentence. But that's a problem, right? How to take very large ideas and put them in pithy, concise statements. Because once you're able to do that, believe me, those are the ones that resonate and stay with the reviewers all the time, because that's a tough thing to do. So that's what we mean by here when we say highlight innovations with qualifiers, right? They should see what is your calling card here in terms of novelty, because NSF is all about, what is the word? Transformative research, right? How do they know from your objective if it's transformative? If your objective doesn't betray that, then I think that's where you are probably not identifying yourself as a special proposal out of those 8 or 6 that panelist is reviewing. Because after 3 or 4, all look the same to them, unless they stand out, on their own. And examples is tough, believe me, because besides what I just told you about the most efficient, the most resolved, and then the reason for that, right? Because I'm using this particular technique, or because I'm using this particular framework, or because I'm coming up with a novel idea of how to look at things now. I mean, I can give examples from my program, but then they may not be understandable to you. So unless Carole and Paige, you have some generic ideas that could be still specific for the audience here.
No, I think you covered this question pretty well about, but I would just reiterate, that when you get your project objective really clearly defined, is specifically defined, that will help in the communication of your actual proposal to the reviewers. And you can also use as a tool to help communicate to program directors on, our opinion of program fit for your project. So question 73 is, I have one aim that provides the foundation for subsequent aims. However, this foundational aim is low risk. How do I convince the reviewers that the proposal won't fall apart due to interdependence between aims? Well, first of all, I would say, if you can indicate this through how you motivate that aim. So, and the risk of it through, for example, preliminary data, maybe your own or in the literature that would communicate that the technical piece of that work is lower risk, and just the way you communicate of how your various aims fit together, which is a good characteristic, I think, of projects. I think in general, reviewers like to see how the various pieces of your project fit together and enrich each other or interact. Paige or Saddiq, do you have any comments on this one?
Well, I want to understand if the word low here means high. Right, that's what it means, right? Because if your foundational aim is high risk, and if it doesn't happen, then everything else falls apart, right? If it's low risk, if it's low risk, wouldn't fall apart. So if that is understanding, then that's fine. I think, Carole, what you've said, high risk proposals are very much encouraged, but obviously you have to put some mitigation plan, perhaps, or you have to at least acknowledge the risks. A lot of times I've noticed panelists dislike the fact that the PI altogether has ignored the risk and not mentioned anything. I would say sometimes even committing a mea culpa and saying, I realize these risks, and not putting a mitigation plan because you don't have it is much better than not recognizing it at all, because they do not take that too kindly. Sometimes they are just okay with the fact, even though that's not desirable, that at least you know what you're going into. Now, if you put a plan B, even a line or two could go a long way. That's my experience. Okay.
Okay. Paige, do you have any?
Yeah, I was just going to what you both said, I think is aligned. If it is the high risk, I wasn't sure if it was high or low risk that was being there, should have been there. But if it is, if it's low risk, but it's a foundational component, that's, okay. But if it's high risk, then the literature or preliminary data or something like that can be used to help also demonstrate the feasibility of it.
So the next question is, should the education plan and the plan for integrating research into education be mostly targeted at a good level of intellectual merit or broader impact?
I don't understand this question.
I don't understand this question. Paige, do you?
I think I do. And so from my perspective, and this could change depending on who you talk to, the integration of the education and the research plan, it's appropriate to bring it up both as intellectual merit and as broader impact. So there should be pieces in both is my perspective.
Okay. So question 75 is funding for collaborators from government agencies such as FDA, CDC allowed on an NSF career? I would say that you can provide funding for senior personnel. I'm not aware off the top of my head of funding for staff, like a federal staff at an agency. I think that might be a question for your sponsored research office, and also looking into the requirements for the PAPG. Not sure if it would cover Saddiq or Paige.
What does it even mean? Like, do they already have funding from FDA or CDC?
Yeah.
I don't know. So let's assume they have the funding already.
Yeah. Right.
And they're already doing that work. So maybe the PI wants to know, can he mention or she mentioned that in the proposal that my collaborator already has a funded project on this? Well, you don't have to mention the agency necessarily, but you can say that they're already funded. I think that would be, I don't know. Is it cost sharing? I don't know.
No, well, it can't be cost sharing, but if it's from the NSF perspective, an unfunded collaborator, then definitely follow the requirements from the PAPPG on unfunded collaborators, and you include that collaboration letter with the stock language, and then you describe the person's role in the facilities and equipment section of the proposal.
So I have a different take on this question.
Sure.
But I don't know the answer to it. So my take on this is, because career does allow for collaborators and you can include that in your budget, I think the question is, can those collaborators be from a government agency? That's my take on this.
Oh, okay. Well, if that is the question, by the way, you can ask the same question again at the bottom and we can come to that. So any question that we don't understand, please put those at the bottom again. But okay, if there is a question, then we cannot, you will have a tough time convincing NSF to support government employees, federal government employees, unless there is a very mitigating circumstances involving national interest, capability, the skills that cannot be possessed by anyone or is not available to anyone, things like those. So you want to be really talking to your program director beforehand on that. Even FFRDCs, federally funded research and development what is C? Corporations, like the DOE labs, MITRE Corporation, the Aerospace Corporation, even those would have a tough time from NSF unless you could prove that they bring something that can only be had in those organizations and nowhere else in the world. For example, beamline, for example, a big microscope or telescope or whatnot. So talk to your PD.
Yeah. So the next question is, are proposals from primarily undergraduate institutions, PUI schools, expected to include a postdoc? Since we can't hire PhD students, are PUI proposals judged any differently regarding IM and BI? So you're not required to include a postdoc if you're from a PUI school. You could include budget for undergraduate researchers or master's students if your department has that master's program. So it's not required to have a postdoc. And are they judged differently? Their PUI proposals is a career accepts proposals from PUI schools, and they're judged on its merits of how you address the intellectual merit and broader impacts. And I think if it's in my opinion, if it's a project that's conducted by undergraduate researchers, I think reviewers take that into account, but they're still looking for its merits in terms of its intellectual merits and the broader impacts. Saddiq and Paige, what are your thoughts on this?
So one is the ideal and the other is a reality. So I want to be frank with people. I want to be clear to them. So NSF doesn't require anything, and NSF wants to make sure that all institutions are represented, and we do go out of our way to try to ensure that. Now, think from a reviewer's perspective in your field, your peers. For example, my community, mechanics community, can be pretty high-minded sometimes, in terms of what they want to see in the proposals, and they might have ideas about how undergrads may not be able to do, very high-level research. So our job is to tell them, no, we have to see on its value basis, right, on what they're trying to achieve and can it be achievable. So you want to just balance those things out in real life and make sure that no such biases are can be used by someone. I mean, we try our best, and that's what we teach everyone about implicit biases, explicit biases, whatnot. But you also have to be prudent and wise about these things. That would be my non-NSF PD researcher type of advice to you.
And the only thing that I would offer that's to add to the conversation is, whatever you choose to do, provide the rationale. So if you choose to go with undergraduates, provide that rationale. If you choose to go with a postdoc, provide that rationale.
Okay, thank you. I was just doing a time check. We have 15 more minutes to make sure we get through these questions. So how important is it to distinguish your research plan / IM from your dissertation research? I would just start it out succinctly that you want to make a clear delineation from your PhD work. A career is about establishing you as an independent researcher from your PhD work, in my opinion.
I agree. And this is very important because you were supposedly doing your PhD research under your advisor, meaning you were not considered as an independent researcher and principal investigator. And now if you continue the same research, people will have sort of serious questions about whether you can think on your own. So a clear demarcation is necessary. Also, people think that you might be competing against well-established names, say your advisor, PhD advisor in that area, and it would be tough. So if you can make the case, as Paige mentioned for the last question also, if you can make the case for creating your own niche and provide leadership in that niche, then I think people will still buy that, but you have to demonstrate that.
Paige, do you have any comment? Okay, let's go on to question 78. How do you recommend have a cohesive broader impact section where 2 or 3 topics are proposed? I understand that you mentioned do not put a laundry list, but what if there are more than one plans? Paige, you want to take the first try at this?
Sure. So this goes back to having the rationale for why. So I'm assuming that this would be part of your educational plan. If you're talking about, it sounds like activities. So what is the story behind those activities, and why are these part of what you want to accomplish as your career, which is setting yourself up for success in the future? And how does this weave together to set up your career for success? So if you have the story that tells why these are the things that are part of how you are going to be achieving your broader impacts, then that's the story you need to tell. But just to say you're going to do A, B, and C and have it disjointed, that could raise questions. So you want to make sure that there's the clarity there of what you're doing and why.
Saddiq, do you have any comments on this?
I think Paige has covered it.
Yeah. Can I use latex like NSF proposal template on overlay for submission? I don't understand this question.
So you can use any word processing software as far as it looks like an NSF formatted proposal.
Right. And and again, we're just doing submissions through research.gov or grants.gov. So if you're not familiar with research.gov, there is this webinar on May 26th that kind of goes into how that will work from 2 to 3:30 Eastern. If the broader impact section directly impacts humans, i.e. human health, do reviewers see it as a conflict between NSF and NIH? This is a general theme also for your program director, especially, there's a number of programs at NSF that interface with NIH to make this distinguished. Paige or Saddiq, do you have thoughts on this?
You're right, Carol. CBET has at least 3 or 4 programs, and CMMI has 1. But besides those, robotics also has human subject testing and all that. Yeah. At the end, the main, if you're just looking for an overall rule of thumb or phrase, then as far as there's no clinical trials, if there's clinical trials, it goes to NIH. If not, then you have to ask your PD.
Yeah, I think your PD, your program PD can give you the best kind of how their program situates, compared to, similar topics that might be under NIH.
I think it's more of a PD question than reviewers. I think reviewers, it's not their job to distinguish between NIH and NSF.
Right.
Yeah, right. But it is important to distinguish that, because that is a concern from a program director perspective.
PD, that's what I'm saying. PD is important here, not the reviewers.
Right. So what is the expectation in terms of scope of the broader impacts on a career proposal compared to an unsolicited proposal? More extensive, more proposed activities? I'll just start off that, again, career has these two pillars. You know, it's 5 years of funding to establish a foundation for your leadership as both a researcher and educator. And so that kind of piece is not part of an unsolicited proposal. It doesn't have these two pillars of your role as educator and researcher. Paige and Saddiq, do you want to fill that out? Or
the educational component is the big distinguisher here. So your traditional unsolicited proposal, you don't necessarily have educational outcomes that you would expect in a career.
And also the integration of research and education is a big consideration, which is not there for unsolicited proposals. So if you want a simple answer, then most career proposals tend to have more extensive activities because it makes sense based on the criteria and consideration that we just explained. But it's not a requirement. See, we cannot impose requirements on you. We want you to be judicious and wise about the merit review criteria and then act accordingly.
Right. So the next question, when we initiate discussion with a program director to confirm program fit, we're recommended to put together a one-pager, you know, and it's talking about the how well conceived this project summary is. So it's probably not the final version of your project summary. I think the point is to put together a one-page summary that really kind of talks about the major research questions and the approach that you'll use as part of your project and the key broader impacts. And to kind of have that together soon, because this is prime season now that we're talking to PIs on these program fit questions. You don't want to be tweaking with it and then come mid-June, you haven't talked to your program director. It's better to have a rougher version now to start that conversation than to not have that time with the program director. Any other thoughts on this?
Well, obviously, if there is a PI applying for the second or third time, their project summary may already look quite a finished piece compared to the first time.
That's true.
So
That's true.
because you asked the question, do we commonly receive already well-conceived, laid out project summaries? So sometimes we do, and sometimes we don't.
That's true. Yeah, right. But I was just trying to, like, you know, it's more important to get the time in if you're not sure about program fit earlier than later.
Correct.
So 83, what are the best ways to differentiate the broader impact section from the education goals? I noticed some PIs include a summary of the education goals in the broader impact section. Is this a good practice? This is kind of a style question, but Paige, do you have some views on this?
I agree with you, Carol. It is a style question. And, you know, you could make a case for organizing it in a lot of different ways. So I think it depends on how you are putting your proposal together and what aligns with the style that you are using.
Get sample copies, please, from your friends, from your mentors, from your university, and you will find all sorts of ways.
Right. So number 84, should we approach the career as a 5-year project with specific aims and hypotheses, or it should be more general, involving 2 to 3 different directions projects which fulfill an overall goal? Again, this question really kind of goes towards how you structure your project. I would say, you know, the career proposal with its dual aims of education and research, if it comes across as a 5-year unsolicited grant, it's probably not going to be as successful, because a career project is a different animal than a unsolicited. But it depends how you formulate your research plan. I don't, Saddiq, do you have any?
Yeah, well, you cannot do 5 one-year projects for sure.
Yeah, right.
So look, we and the reviewers, we want leaders in the field to be developed out of this career proposal, right? Because it's a career research and education development award. So do you think you can do 2 or 3 different projects and still create an impact that would make you a considerable leader in the field, or not, right? That's your choice to make. But mostly we see just one research objective, overarching research objective. It may have different thrusts, but it still is trying to solve this one piece of the puzzle, like any other research objective or unsolicited proposal. It may have grand ambitions like a goal, but goals are always pursued, they're never fulfilled, whereas objective can be achieved.
Okay, so question 85 is how to understand reviewers' criticism primarily on the risk mitigation plans, but not the major research plan. What level of details are expected in the risk mitigation plan is expected? I think in general, it's getting towards the overall question of the reviewer of making sure that the project doesn't fall apart if a particularly risky piece of the project doesn't go as expected. So if it's a technique, and a very new technique, a mitigation plan might say, well, if this doesn't, get the resolution that we expect, we're going to use this other technique. It's really providing the reviewers a cushion that fundamental knowledge and broader impact outcomes come out of the project. Paige or Saddiq, do you have any other comments? Or?
I'll give you a thought experiment to pursue, folks. Imagine your 5 competitors, junior faculty like you, very ambitious, very competitive. And imagine you're putting your case in front of them, and with your risk mitigation plan, are they buying virtually in your mind? You are the best judge. You will see when you imagine them and putting this question in front of them, how the audience may perceive your arguments. I think that kind of visualization will help you out, because we cannot help you from the outside, not at all. I mean, you are your own expert, your field, your peers, your colleagues. Think about them and see if they will buy that.
Okay, and I have a postdoc supported from another funding source. I'm not adding the postdoc's budget to my career proposal. Can I still say that the postdoc will be performing a part of the research without budget assigned?
No, Carol, I don't think you can do that.
I don't think that sounds like cost share.
That's like cost sharing. You cannot mention any outside external funding source.
Yeah. And the last one is the research scope need to be large. It's a 5-year project, so you should have activities that are commensurate with a 5-year effort. With, in engineering, we've been talking about typically 1 full-time graduate student and up to 1 month summer salary for you. But for both the intellectual merit and the broader impacts, it's a 5-year effort. So you want to make sure that you've designed a project for that level of effort. And I think we got through all of them. I want to thank everyone. And you'll have one more session, and then there's the PD coaching. And then make sure you fill out the evaluation forms today, because the organizers definitely value that and really use that to help improve the effort. So that's a really important piece as well.
There is one more question.
There's one more question. It snuck in there. Okay. Can we support someone off of your startup instead of?
Same thing. You cannot say you will have someone funded from another resource working on this project, period.
Right. Yeah, no cost share. Yeah.
Well, actually, that was my question, and actually, that is university supported for my research. 50%. Is it still cannot?
No. You cannot mention that I will have help from elsewhere to support this project. Period.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so we're gonna have a 15-minute break. And then we're going to go to another group, and you guys will get another speaker in the final 4th topic that you didn't hear from yet. And I don't know which one it is, but it will be the 4th one that you haven't heard yet. So thanks, everyone.
And if you have questions, we have a tradition here, then please send them to Carol,
Yes,
She'll
yes,
gladly-
yeah, okay, yeah, that was yes, please send me your questions. No, seriously, my email is easy, it's cread@nsf.gov, and please send your questions, okay? All
Thank
right,
you.
thank you, everyone.